Life can change in an instant. For many wheelchair users, the struggle to push forward is a daily challenge. After years of development and countless prototypes, we created Rib Grips, the revolutionary wheelchair hand rim covers with built-in ribs for ultimate grip and comfort. No more slick surfaces, no more heat burns, just pure, reliable grip. Rib Grips, empowering you to push forward with ease. Rib Grips. Get a grip on your freedom. Discover the difference. Visit ribgrips.com and use promo code GRIP today. You just found the perfect product that helps with staying cool during hot summer runs. No more gross warm water. Stay cool with this product from Gear Handle. This hydration tube cover helps keep your water cool and easily accessible. Stay hydrated during those long summer runs or even delay from freezing in the winter. Plus, they're compatible with various brands of water bladders and come in various colors. Visit gearhandle.com and use promo code H2O today. This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Coming up on the Payoff, we always keep it 100% honest here. That's part of the authenticity that comes with being sober. That being said, this is one of my favorite conversations we have ever had on this podcast. It's sports, it's sobriety, obviously. It's incredible honesty, and it's totally inspiring. 3-time gold medal winner, Carrie Bates, lost it all to alcoholism, and now today she has it all back. You've got to hear the story. That's coming up next. But first, Kevin Souza. All right, Carrie, thank you so much for taking the time. It's not every day. It's probably never that I bump into an Olympian, especially a 3-time gold medal winner. You're at home right now in Portland, and you were a part. We talked about it when I messaged you a little bit. You know, you were a part of my childhood. Like that '84 Olympics was a huge deal. You and I both got sober around the same time. You got sober in February 1st of 2012. I was November 7, 2011. So, relatively the same time. You grew up in Northern California. Before we get to your rise as an Olympian, and then of course like the alcohol and then the sobriety, what was your childhood like growing up in Northern California?
Yeah, I had a really good childhood in Northern California. I did grow up in an alcoholic home, but I did not come from insecurity. I never had to worry about if there was going to be food on the table or if the lights were going to be on or off. So those were things I didn't have to deal with as a child. So I was able to kind of focus on what I wanted to do in sports and in my schooling and things like that. But I did grow up in an alcoholic home. So there are residual effects of that.
Now, what was that home like? For me, it was my dad was an alcoholic, like functional, whatever that is, right? I know you work in the field, so I'll be interested to hear your take on that. Yeah. But he had a job. He provided. He loved us very, very much. But alcoholism was in him, and it was all over his side of the family. And I remember when he came home from work, it was like the record would stop. Like everything had to be kind of taken care of because he just wasn't going to be in a real good mood. That was my experience, and I realize now, like working through some of that stuff as a kid. What was your experience, like the alcoholic household?
Yeah, it was my mom was an alcoholic, but I also grew up in a very traditional household where my father was the breadwinner and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And but it was her that was the alcoholic, and she too had the people that I know of on her side of the family, her father, so my grandfather. There's a lot of people on her side of the family, and then in my nuclear family that did struggle with substance use disorder. So it's interesting because I grew up in an alcoholic home that comes with its own, as you stated, kind of your dad's behaviors. It comes with these behaviors, but I also didn't come from a home that I didn't have to worry about, if there was going to be food on the table.
Yeah, me too. Like it's kind of like that thing we say in recovery, like throw your problems into the middle of the room with everybody else. Like you'll take yours back. Like I look back, I'm like, I had like a great childhood, right? But that was one of like the things or the hurdles that I think I was met with then, and I'm still kind of going through, still kind of getting over today, right? That's why we practice
Of course.
recovery. So for you, you're growing up. When did you figure out that you were going to be such an elite swimmer?
I'm not sure that I really figured that out until pretty last minute. I felt like I was always talented. I was, I won. I loved doing it. I swam in summer leagues when I first started. And, I really got into swimming because I just followed my older brother who was in swimming at the time. And, he ended up leaving and going to other sports. But I think that I stayed because I think that we naturally gravitate to where we have success. And I was feeling a level of success in the pool, but I was also doing other sports. I was playing soccer. I was doing gymnastics. And, I really didn't focus on one sport until I was about 12. But then I was swimming twice a day, before school, after school, 4 or 5 hours on a Saturday. So it amped up pretty quickly for me. I made my first national team in 1983. So really just 1 year before the Olympics. So that was kind of the year that I think my coach sat me down and said, you do realize that being an Olympian is a real possibility for you.
And by the way, you're 15.
I was 15. Yeah.
Like, how do you even wrap your mind around that?
I didn't have a hard time wrapping my brain around it because it's what I wanted. It's what I put posters in my room, and I'm a big goal setter, and I had poster boards with my goals handwritten right next to my bed to remind myself why I was getting out of bed, at 4:30 in the morning every day.
Where'd that come from?
I think that the taste of success for me just really sparked this drive that, I loved training. I loved competing, and I really loved winning. And so the combination of those three things and the fact that they all did come together for me, I think continue to drive that focus in me.
When you're a young girl and your life now, I can't speak for you, but it sounds like competitive swimming takes a lot of time. Are you not, is there points like where you're maybe not developing socially, where you maybe should be, or was the interaction, because being on a team, I grew up playing sports, college football,
Yep.
like it's awesome. Being camaraderie, being on a team is one of the best things in the world. But at the same time too, you were so young. Did that stunt any of your emotional growth?
Do you want the hindsight answer to
Yes.
that, or do you want the in the moment, answer? I think when I was going through it, as most of us, when we're in the moment, we don't see kind of what's happening. I felt super well-rounded at that point in my life in terms of being social. But really my social life and my feeling of acceptance kind of in the world and my self-confidence and my feeling like I was good enough at something all came from one place, right? So in hindsight, yes, I think that I'm not sure it stunted my social growth, but I think it really limited me and didn't prepare me for the end of my swimming career.
And at this time, just knowing your story a little bit, you're a swimmer. You're not like a young girl that's like, out there smoking pot and drinking and then swimming, right? You're like 100% like swimming. That's pure intentions. But like on the other side of it, there's this incredible ecstasy you get from the competition and the winning. Like those endorphins are certainly satisfied, I would imagine.
Of course. And, that also in hindsight kind of worked against me, I think, later in life when I was struggling with substances and I was really struggling to find my way into a sustainable recovery, was that I kind of spent, after 1984 in the Olympics, I think I spent the next 35 years looking for something that would make me feel like that 55 seconds made me feel.
Yeah.
And the way the training made me feel and the way that racing made me feel. I lost more races than I than I won. I mean, that's the reality for most of us. And I just happened to win a lot of races when it really mattered. But I think that, you know, when
some
you
people would
train
say
at that level,
that's called excellence, though, and that's called being a champion.
right. Right. But I think that there's a misunderstanding out there that we always win everything, and that's just not true.
Mhm.
Right. And so I think that for those of us that train at that level, that compete at that level, that have that kind of endorphins and serotonin kind of always flooding through us, because yeah, we're tired when we train like that, but there's still a huge level of serotonin and endorphins that are running at that, you know, during that period of time, that when it kind of comes to an end, I definitely found myself searching for that, you know, searching for that feeling, for that connection, for that community, for that acceptance, that validation. Like my whole identity was wrapped up in swimming. And of course, I didn't know it, but you know, so when I didn't make the Olympic team 4 years later, I had really no plan B in life. Like I had never thought about my life outside of swimming, and I had certainly never considered not being on that Olympic team.
Yeah, you know, it sounds like I can relate. Like the pilot light was always lit, right?
Always.
But then when you're done and you're not receiving the endorphins or whatever, the adulation from being, you know, a swimmer competitively, and that alcohol hits the spot, it's like, you know, it's for me, it was like my first spiritual experience. Let's go backwards to 1984. So you're 16 years old. The Olympics, I mean, it's just like it's a golden time in America. I know I was a kid, but whatever. It just seemed really awesome. You know, Karate Kids in the movies, you know, again, like I was young. It was like America was a very, very amazing place. Still is, but there was something about it where we had a little ignorance, I think. And the Olympics were
the 80s were a great time to be alive. That's for sure.
Yes. Okay, cool. So you co-sign with that. The Olympics are in LA. What was that like? Not only to compete in Los Angeles in the 1984 Summer Olympics, you know, Mary Lou Retton became a household name. You did too, you know, winning 3 gold medals at 16 years old. What was that like for you, that experience? You know, what do you remember from that as far as how it shaped you, and just some of the moments that you look back now and you're like, wow.
Yeah. You know, I think that being an Olympian, and that in being in that moment, I don't think that I had the wherewithal or the knowledge or the life experience to really understand the gravity of what I had accomplished at 16 years old. I'm not sure that I certainly didn't know how it would change the trajectory of my entire life. All I knew was that I was doing something I loved, and that I won a gold medal that I couldn't wait to share with my family. I loved being on that team. It was a really, really special team because so many of those athletes had stuck around from the boycott of 1980. And so I got to watch teammates of mine realize their dream 4 years after they had really realized their dream, but weren't able to go. So there was a really special bond with that team, I think. And then there is no replacing being at home and being on the US soil and being a champion from the country that you're performing in. You know, I've been asked so many times in my life, like, oh, it's terrible you didn't go away for the Olympics. And my point is, no, as an athlete, it's all you could ever want is to have the familiar surroundings, familiar food, familiar everything. I mean, we're in the middle of the 24 Olympics now, and we hear all of the things that we're hearing, right? Like the beds are terrible and the food's terrible, and you know, all these things that are a challenge as an athlete when you're trying to perform to the best of your abilities, certainly on the biggest stage in the world. So, you know, I think the things I remember most is the team, meeting people from other countries, from other sports. We were on the same floor with the US boxers. So like when I came out of the elevator after the 100 freestyle, like Tyrell Biggs was the guy that was standing outside of the elevator and picked me up. And, I mean, it was just an amazing time, and after the Olympics, Southland Corporation at that time owned all the 7-Elevens in the country. And they took all of the U.S. medal winners on a tour of the United States afterwards. And that is something I will never forget. That was an incredible experience. They did a ticker tape parade for us in New York. And I mean, these are eyes wide open experiences as a 16-year-old kid to be able to experience. But I think when I was in it, I didn't realize all that it meant, right?
Yeah, how could you? I mean, I can't. You're 16 years old, and for you, it's pretty awesome. And I think that's the magic of being such an elite swimmer and a champion, is that you kind of don't really notice that it's a big deal. It's like you just keep going forward because it's what you do and you're great at it. And it kind of, the mental part of it maybe comes a little easier. Now, as you've opened up about, you go to UT, you swim there. You're the number one swimmer in the country. Now, sidebar, in college, were you drinking at all? Like, you're drinking? Okay, so
for sure.
So how was that like? What was that drinking like when you're swimming and you're an undergrad in Austin?
Yeah, I think that it's funny because I've often thought about that. I think we always try and figure out when we cross that proverbial line. And I think that, the answer I've come to is it really doesn't matter because it got crossed somewhere. But I will say that I feel like we partied a lot, but I also think we had a mentality where we trained really hard and we played hard too. So I've asked teammates and friends from college if they felt like somehow my drinking stood out from anybody else's. And the answer has always been no. So I don't think my drinking was any different than my peers in college. But I will say in 1988, when I did not make that team in Austin, Olympic trials were in Austin that year. And I stood in the stands that last night and watched that team assemble on the side of the pool. All of my friends that really had become my family, my boyfriend at the time, everyone was lined up on that pool deck and I was watching from the stands. And that was the first time I remember drinking for the sole purpose of not feeling.
Yeah. And I can imagine and at the time you probably didn't know it. But for me, that's a huge shot to your ego too. You're the number one swimmer in the world. Now your dreams are crushed, but also gosh, sometimes the pain of my ego, even today in sobriety, I got to get out of that. Right. But that pain can be very sharp. And sometimes you just want an escape. And so alcohol was your escape. What happened at the 88 trials that you, I've heard you talk about it. You just fell apart. Was it, you'd won a bunch of gold medals. You were obviously at the top of the mountain. So what do you think transpired that led to that disappointment?
I think that,
did you just lose, which is totally normal and okay?
No.
Okay.
I think, no, I think I let the pressure of being a 3-time Olympian, being the champion in the 100 freestyle as that was my event, still being ranked number 1 in the world. And I think that I really let that, the difference between 16 and 20 mentally is a big deal. And at 16, I was just having fun. At 20, it was everything, right? It was my identity. It was my friendships. It was literally my whole life. And so that's maybe the negative part as we get older in sport is that, when we're young, we do it because it's fun and we have fun and we're with our friends. And, I got to ride in a limousine for the first time and I was on the Today Show and it all felt so bougie and fun and, exciting. And then 4 years later at 20, it was like, I had a lot at stake.
Yeah.
And I think that all of it, I just mentally fell apart in the warm-up pool. before my race. I was crying before my prelim race.
Wow.
I mean, that had never happened to me before, ever.
That's an amazing story. And it speaks. Go ahead.
And because of that, I ended up first alternate. So I didn't even have the chance to come back and try again at night in finals, because I was first alternate. So it was, it was devastating.
Did you go in '88? The Olympics are in Seoul, Korea. Do you go with the team as an alternate, or do you stay home?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Nope. I stayed home and tried to watch it at, this is back in '88, right? We didn't have other channels and all the internet and everything to watch the Olympics. So I would try and stay up in the middle of the night and watch it and stuff. But even that proved to be really just too hard for me.
Yeah,
it was just too hard, imagine. Too fresh, too raw, too painful, As a matter of fact, if I'm being really honest, that failure, my perceived failure of '88 honestly outweighed my success in '84 until probably 4 years into my sobriety.
Wow. And that brings me to another thing that you say that blew my mind when I heard you say it, is that addiction is more powerful than love.
Yes.
Almost like loss can be more powerful than the victory, right? Because to me that it's kind of like it's a head game, right? It's a lot of bullshit. You tell yourself you're no good. Before we get to that,
but I also had headlines in newspapers that said that I couldn't, Steincypher can't hold up to her past, or, there was a lot of headlines in the newspapers that also told me that I was reading and believing, right? So, and why wouldn't I believe them? Because it's actually what happened. So there was a lot of things coming at me that just kept solidifying the fact that I wasn't enough anymore. And so, there began almost my imposter syndrome and my shame and embarrassment and lack of self-esteem and self-confidence and, all of these things. And, I was 20 years old. I was still, for all intents and purposes, a kid.
Yeah.
And there began a very, very long struggle with what was on the outside versus what I felt about myself on the inside.
What a pressure cooker the Olympics are, right? You mentioned you're watching it now. Because if you lose an NBA Finals, if you win an NBA Finals and then you lose like 2 years later, like it's not the end of the world. Like you won one, you lost one, right? It's not like this great implosion took place. But the Olympics are, like you work your whole life for it, and the whole world is watching. That's a global disappointment, right? In reality, you're just a human being. You start to drink a lot. Take us through the evolution of your alcoholism, because it gets pretty bad pretty fast. I think, as far as what I've heard you say.
Yeah. And, to your point also about the NBA versus the Olympics is that, the NBA championships happen every year.
Yeah.
The Olympics, we only get every 4 years. And so, it's easy for people that don't do Olympic sports to say, oh, you hear it all the time. Like they can just stick around until the next Olympics. But what people don't realize is the dedication, the work, I don't love to use the word sacrifice. I prefer the word choice, the choices that we make to stay relevant in those 4 years and competitive and all those things. So, but yeah, my drinking really didn't, it took off for a while after trials in '88. I would say for the next 6 months, I was probably drinking what may have been considered problematic. And then, life kind of took on a new, my life kind of evolved from there a little bit. And so, I ended up joining a sorority, and, I kind of did the whole opposite thing at school. than I had done for the first few years I was there. And, you know, in some ways it was the best thing I ever did. And then in some ways it was maybe the worst thing I ever did. And, you know, after college, I started working in the sports industry right away. Peter Uberoth, who was the commissioner of the,
and he was the guy
Olympics,
that brought the Olympics to LA, right? Or he ran it, right?
Yeah, he was the commissioner of LA, and no, the whatever his title was, but yeah, he ran 84, and then he ended up being the commissioner of the MLB, I think.
Yeah, because he did such a kick-ass job in 84.
Yep. Yeah. So, you know, after I was done with school, I reached out to him because he was also a part owner of Adidas America back then. And Adidas owned Arena, which is a swimwear brand. And so I reached out to him and said, you know, I was looking for a job. I wanted to get in the sports business. And so he gave me my first job in the industry. And then I spent the next, you know, 25 years working in the field. You know, I worked at Arena. I worked at Reebok for some years, but the lion's share of my career was spent at Nike, and then again at Converse, which is a subsidiary of Nike. And so, you know, I really, after the Olympics, went on to have a wonderful life. You know, on the outside, I looked like I had it all, right? I got married. I had 2 beautiful daughters. I was successful in my career. I was traveling the world. And again, on the outside, my life looked perfect. It looked like I had everything. And, you know, on the inside, I was like silently dying. You know, I was still kind of inside so tormented with this feeling of being not what the world thought I was. You know, my drinking really started to escalate after I had my kids. It was not before then. And so really when I started to know that my drinking was becoming problematic was when my family and close friends were expressing concern. And that's typically what happens to most of us, I would think. You know, I think when we're in it, we're not great self-assessors. Plus, we have this kind of disease that tells us that we're fine. You know, I believe that those of us that have struggled with substances and addiction, we have the only progressive, incurable, and fatal disease that tells us that we don't have it. And so, so really my drinking became problematic in probably 2009 when my family and friends started to express kind of a lot of concern.
And you had this great self-will and drive and competitiveness that made you a gold medal winner. And I'd heard John Lucas say this, the basketball player, you know, is sober now. And he talks about that as an athlete, it's so hard to it can be harder for athletes to get sober because all the things that made them elite now you can't do it yourself. Was that something you can relate to?
Well, yeah, I mean, it almost killed me, you know, ultimately. Before I got sober in 2012, I was at a very low bottom, and I don't think that I had a whole lot longer to live, which I didn't want to anyway. So that really didn't faze me. But really everything that contributed to my success as an elite athlete were the very things that nearly killed me. You know, my inability to ask for help, my mentality to just if I can be the best in the world at something, I can surely figure out this problem I have with drinking. You know, I think that we can compartmentalize so many things as athletes, right? Because if you can't get past the losses or past the defeat and the exhaustion of training and all these things, then we would never live to win another race. And so I had this mentality that if I just got through it, that next episode, that next binge, that would be it, right? And I would wake up every day and swear I wasn't going to drink that night. I would just swear up and down I wouldn't take a drink. I was just as convicted as possible. And then by 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock or whatever the magic time was, I just was completely defenseless. I was absolutely defenseless against that first drink.
How about consequences?
Oh, I mean, my consequences were happening faster than I could lower my own standards, to be honest.
And
I don't ever remember waking up saying, it's now acceptable to start drinking at 3 p.m, or it's now acceptable to start drinking at 7 a.m. when I wake up because I get too sick if I don't, or it's now acceptable for me to drink and drive with my kids in the car because they have to get to sports, and I'm going to drink and drive to do that. But I'm a great mom because I'm getting them to sports and I have food on the table for them at night, and I'm still working a successful job. So how dare you tell me that my drinking is the problem?
And there's doors that I feel like I know I walked through that I didn't go back through, right? Until I got sober. Like you mentioned, drinking in the morning, driving your kids around. Was it harder for you? Something I absolutely don't know about as a woman who had accomplished so much to publicly ask for help?
I think that anytime you live your life in the public eye, there is some perceived added pressures to admitting defeat, or admitting that we need help, or that we have found something in our lives that is completely unmanageable and has overtaken us. Because the view that I thought that the world had of me, or any Olympian or elite athlete of any nature, is that we can handle anything. Look how strong we are, that we can figure out our way through these things. So I think that I would not say as a woman it's harder. I would say the pressures and the stigma towards women, and then you add in another layer of being a mom, are just much different.
Yeah. When
oftentimes you hear people say about men, like, oh, he just can't handle his alcohol.
Yeah.
And then
he just goes hard.
Right. Or that's just who he is. He drinks too much and then he drives home from the bar. But oftentimes with women and moms, you're going to hear, I heard all of it, horrible mother, bad person, terrible, this, terrible that. As a matter of fact, when I left for treatment the last time in 2012, when I ultimately found sustainable recovery, I was told to just disappear, and that my girls' lives would just be better if I just left and never came back. And I believed it. I 100% believed that crap that was told to me. It didn't matter how much people told me I was terrible. It didn't matter how much people hated me. It didn't matter how many times I was told I was a bad mom. Because no one hated me more than I hated myself anyways. So, but it does matter, because as you know too, language matters. And when people are told things, it stings, and it can contribute to people being sicker, and it can contribute to people feeling not worthy of even living. And that's when we have to be super careful about the things that we say to people that are having addiction or mental health issues.
You really piqued my interest when you mentioned about, the stigma with women. You work in the recovery field at Hazelwood and Betty Ford. Is there something you say to a woman who asks you or who says to you, it does feel like there's more judgment towards me, and because that can get in the way of the solution?
Sure. I'm not sure that there's any one thing that I say, but what I really try to impart on all women is that the lies that we're told when we're in active addiction are just that. They're lies, and they're not true. Our kids do love us again. They do trust us again. I would argue that we have an even better relationship with our kids when we find recovery, because it's rooted in a lot of pain, but it's also rooted in honesty and trust and authenticity, right? And so,
And it's like, if you don't believe me, I got thousands of other women in recovery that I can show you, millions at this point, right? Like that's how that kept the fire alive for me. It's like, okay, this guy was exactly where I am now, and look at him and look at his relationships in his life.
Yeah. And my kids tell their story. They tell other moms, yes, your kids will love you if you find recovery. Wow. They will trust you again. You know, they have participated with me telling because we all have a story, and theirs is not mine. And other moms have loved to hear from my kids that, yes, there is forgiveness. There is laughter that comes into the house again about, you know, the Halloween decorations that were still up in my house in July. You know, there is healing that happens together, and there's hope, right? And so, and the other thing I try and tell women is that the things that they've done, you know, like if people have been drinking and driving with their kids, or if they've forgotten their kids at a play date, or if they've gotten so drunk they didn't hear the doorbell ring when a kid came home, or they missed a call in the middle of the night from their kid because they were passed out. You know, all these things that are so judged and they're not good, right? Like, they're not good qualities and things that I did when I was drinking. But I wasn't a bad person trying to get good, right? I was sick. And what I try and impart in other women and moms is that there is nothing that they have done that has not been done before them. There's nothing they have done that someone else hasn't told a part of their story before them. So, but it's hard, you know, it's hard for moms, it's hard for women. And, you know, there is a different stigma that's attached to it.
You mentioned it. You in 2 years, you go to four different treatment centers, right? What changed for you that now you have that long-term recovery? What changed for you when you were at your moment of desperation, right? Your rock bottom, and how did you keep it going?
Well, you know, after I had been in treatment 3 times, and I didn't stay sober after the 3rd time at all. And so, you know, I think for me, I wasn't seeing my girls anymore because their dad, you know, definitely didn't want them exposed to it, which, I mean, who can blame him? You know, I was really isolated. I was a home drinker. So I wasn't leaving the house, you know, blinds all closed, super dark place. And I made the decision that I would, you know, at the encouragement of a few people that I had left in my life, which was not many at that point. I made the decision that I would go to treatment one last time to try and save my life. But first I was going to detox at home alone, because I didn't want to survive. And I knew how dangerous alcohol withdrawal was. And so I made the commitment that if I survived it, that I would go one last try.
Knowing that you could die.
For sure. Hoping.
Yeah.
Hoping. Because somehow that seemed easier and a way out that sobriety had eluded me from, right? And so I stopped drinking cold turkey at home. I went into a 5-day withdrawal detox that was incredibly painful. I heard voices and TVs that weren't on, and people weren't there. And I was so sick. And 5 days later, I came to, and then I packed my stuff and I went to the airport by myself, and I got on a plane and I flew down to Southern California.
Wow.
And and I admitted into the Betty Ford Center. And, I remember showing up on those steps thinking, I'm just going to tell my truth, which is something I had never done in treatment. I told bits and pieces of my truth, and I told parts of my truth, the stuff I really had maybe less shame about, but and the things that I thought they wanted to hear, right? And that maybe would get me out of there faster. And I went down to California, and I didn't do it perfectly. I don't even really know what that means. I got in trouble in treatment, and I broke the rules, but there's one thing that I did perfectly, and that was I told my truth from top to bottom. I held nothing back. I didn't care what people thought. I didn't care what they thought of me. I didn't care what they thought of things I said. I wasn't there to make friends. I didn't care if anyone liked me there. I was there to try one last time to save my life, really not thinking that it would work. But I did tell my truth. And I believe that that was the key to my freedom, is I left everything in those walls for 90 days. And I did everything that was asked of me. And if they had told me to stand on my head for 30 minutes a day in a corner, I would have done that too. And when I finished the 90 days, I asked if I could start over. And
I was a long-term recovery person too. Like, I went to a treatment center, and then I went to an extended care for like 4 months, and it was it was amazing. I started to feel good. Right. Because like you just talked about it. That's the blueprint, or at least for me. And it obviously was for you, just going to any lengths. Like, I got nothing left. Like, I had to be totally broken.
I had nothing left.
Okay, I guess I really will try this. And like you, it took me 10 years to get a year, right? Like, I was in and out. But when it happens, it's pretty awesome. So you wanted to stay after 90 days. And what happened then?
Well, I wanted to stay because I knew I was going to come home and have to face the wreckage, right? And I was really afraid. I was afraid. So they said, no, it's time to get out of the shallow end and let all the little ones coming in that don't know how to swim yet, like, we got to let them in and you got to go. And so I came back to Portland, and it was devastating to come back and have to face all the wreckage. I was back for, I don't know, maybe 30 days, and I got laid off from Nike, which is fair. They did it in a really fair way. I mean, how much can you get paid for work and not work? And so I lost my career at 30, after being home for 30 days. And then at about 96 days sober, I walked into a courtroom and I lost legal rights to my children. And my ex-husband, felt like that was the safest thing to do for the girls. And I don't know how I survived that, right? Like, sometimes I think we look back on our early recovery, and at least that first year, and, we just have people that kind of tape our asses back on when they fall off, because all of them fall off in the first year of recovery. And I remember being in that courtroom and the judge saying to me, all you have to do is stay sober for 2 years and everything will go back to the way it was. And I thought, oh my God, 2 years?
Yeah, because that's easy, right?
I mean, and I said to him, please don't say that stuff to people like me, because 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, let alone 2 years is miraculous for people like me. And I spent the next 2 years in a fishbowl, and the girls and I scratched and clawed our way into this amazing life that we have. And it took me 4 years into my sobriety to even talk about it publicly. It took me 2 years, I think, up until all of my legal rights were reinstated and, life went back to whatever normal means. I didn't even look at myself in the mirror. And I'm talking like I was brushing my teeth in the shower. That's how much shame I carried for those 2 years. And I hung on for dear life. I hung on for dear life. And, you know, through grace and through work and through, you know, every resource available to me, the we of recovery, the we that we experience in recovery, you know, we made it through those 2 years and got to start over. And that was a miracle. And so at 4 years sober was the first time I posted on Facebook about my recovery. And I don't know why I was hiding. It's not like everyone around me didn't know my story.
Yeah,
I've been in treatment.
You're pretty public,
times.
right? Yeah.
And the first thing I did was I took a picture of one of my Olympic gold medals next to my 4-year 12-step coin.
Awesome.
And I said, the big medal represents what I did, and the small medal represents who I am. And it was the first time that I recognized that I needed to use my platform that was given to me 40 years ago to talk about this and to give hope to other people and to not be ashamed, but to be incredibly proud of being a woman in long-term recovery. And honestly, I actually believe the Olympics, like it's 2024. Yesterday was my 40-year anniversary of winning my first medal. And I would say it's the first Olympics that I really feel proud of myself. So it's the first time in 40 years that I reflect on it makes me emotional even talking about it, but that I can reflect back on 84 with gratitude and feel proud of myself. And also be able to look back on 88 and think that had to happen too, to serve where I am today. And that also is freedom.
What has been the turning point to this understanding and acceptance that somebody from the outside would have told you to have years ago, but it ain't all that easy when it's you actually living the sermon?
I think that I'm not just, proud of the Olympics, but I'm just proud of who I am today. I'm proud of being a woman that is of integrity and honesty, and I don't lie anymore. I show up when I say I'm going to show up. I have a relationship with my girls that I don't think would be as good as it is today if we hadn't been through all the challenges that we had. And don't get me wrong, I will always have regret for the pain that I put them through. But they're adults now, and I couldn't ask for a better relationship than I have with my kids. So I think what this Olympics has given me is not just to be able to reflect back on my own Olympic experience, but my human experience, and feel the shame for me is gone, that I'm not ashamed of what I became in my addiction. I am incredibly proud of who I've become in recovery.
What are your relationships like with some of your former teammates? Like, because here's why I asked that. I went to the University of Richmond, football there, and I was in free fall after that, right? And I lost relationships with pretty much all my guys because they were just like, look, we can't be around you. Like, we love you. And now, 12 years later, there's some of the most magical relationships I have in my life. And there was a point in time where I wasn't quite sure if they were going to come back around. I really was going to have to live with that because consequences, whatever. But, you mentioned the relationships. They all came back around. Was that something that you experienced?
I would say in my regular life, no. My friendships that I had, not teammates or anything, but like my core group of women friends, mom friends that are here in Oregon, no, they are not in my life. And that's okay. the, they, those women were incredibly special to me for that period of my life. But no, they're no longer in my life. Now, when you talk about teammates, you know, the woman, Nancy Hogshead, that I tied with in 84 has been an incredible support system to me. She's stood by my side. She has been a cheerleader. She's been a support system. And, you know, at Olympic trials this year, they honored the 84 team and I didn't go. And I pulled away from my swimming past. They didn't pull away from me because none of them were close enough to me to know what I was experiencing. Most people didn't know, you know, and most people had no idea until I posted about it on Facebook for the first time at 4 years sober. And I'm talking not just, you know, people domestically, but like all my international swimming friends, right? Like nobody knew because I hid it and I was isolated and, you know, I don't live around any of my teammates from 84 or, you know, my international friends. And so people were shocked, but I pulled away from that community because I didn't know where I fit there. I didn't know how to step my foot back in there and not feel that imposter piece of it. Right. And so it's taken me a really long time to embrace my Olympic past, my Olympic teammates, and to feel part of, not apart from. But all the way up to Olympic trials this year, I didn't go. And I made that choice consciously. I just couldn't make myself go. And I got a lot of texts from that meet and people from my past saying, your family here misses you. And you belong here and you're a part of us. And it's funny because I've never said it to them, but it's almost as if they sense that I didn't feel like I belonged to, you know, like I belong there.
Yeah.
And so I got a lot of messages from Olympic trials. And so the last, you know, 6 or 8 weeks has been just a whole nother layer of healing for me. Right. Because that's the beauty of recovery and sobriety is that we never stop learning.
We're never done. We're still peeling. We're still peeling the layers. Yeah. It's so cool. And that's like, if we stay in action and keep moving in the direction we're supposed to move in, you really don't know what's around the next corner. And it can be a tough thing, but like we stay with, you mentioned all the people that tape our ass back on, we stay with them and all that stuff is manageable. Right. Yeah. And then there's so much beautiful stuff.
And it's so unexpected. Yeah. Like if you'd asked me, if we had this talk 6 weeks ago, none of this would we be talking about because I had no idea. But that's the beauty that keeps being the beauty of the ugly and the beautiful is, I mean, it just keeps being revealed as our recovery progresses and our ability to kind of stay in the present and be present for these things that present themselves to us. Right. And so completely unexpected experience in the last 6 weeks and certainly in the last 3 days.
Your honesty is so empowering. A couple more things for you before I let you get back to your life, or maybe one more thing. You are helping people today. Do you understand the power of that? Like I love how you mentioned, and one thing I noticed just because I'm a weirdo with people's stories, you know, you won a gold in Southern California. I'm sure swimming took you there and work took you back there with Nike and whatever. But then you get into treatment in Southern California, two of the same, you know, the geographic area. You really found life, or, you know, found your professional life or the top of it. And then you had your life saved there. It's just some of the coolest stuff. This story you have, you know, how do you use it now to help people coming behind you? I know you work for Hazelden and Betty Ford. You know, talk us through some of that stuff.
Well, you know, really what I get to do every day is I get to help people find treatment, you know, whether that's because I'm a believer that treatment works. I'm also not naive to know to not think that there's bad players in this industry, as there are in every field. And it's unfortunate, but I also believe that treatment works, and there's a lot of great treatment providers out there. And I know it took me every resource available to me, from residential to outpatient to therapy groups to one-on-one therapy to, I mean, you name it, I needed it. And it's what I created as my we of recovery, right? And also other people in recovery. And, I try to help people by telling them that going to treatment and asking for help is the bravest thing they'll ever do. I try to tell them that it takes a tremendous amount of courage to pick up that 10,000-pound phone and make a phone call to a treatment center or to somebody that works for a treatment center to ask, what do I do now? Help me. What do I do? I feel blessed that three of my 4 treatment experiences happened within the walls of the Hazelden Betty Ford Foundation. And the fact that I work here now, I mean, if you had told me that 12 years ago, I would have also thought you were crazy. But it was like coming home for me. Like this, this is where I belong. This is exactly where my life was going to take me. Even when I stood on the highest platform in the world and had a gold medal put around my neck, I believe that this is exactly where I was meant to end up, where my purpose and passion get to come together. And I get to do the work of helping other people understand that they're not bad people, and that this is a sickness, and that there is recovery, and that there is always, always hope for recovery.
Talking to you, the sunlight of the spirit is splashing through. What do you do daily to maintain that? Because we can all, mine can flicker out a little bit. I went to a meeting today, 12-step meeting, and I kind of almost felt like I was in a foreign country. I was so twisted around the axle, and it took me a minute to kind of get that flow again. What are you doing to stay in that flow?
For me, my recovery, I will always consider the foundation of my recovery, where I really laid the foundation for my long-term, my sustained recovery will be always rooted in 12 steps. But today, many things contribute to my recovery, whether it be training for, some crazy race I decide to do on a whim, or, being active is important to me. It could be hiking in a beautiful place in Oregon, being outside, spending time with my kids. I'm an introvert by nature, and I can turn it on and off, but I'm a homebody and I'm an introvert, and for the first time in my life, I feel okay alone, and I feel okay in solitude and in quiet. And that used to be a pretty uncomfortable place for me to be. There's many things, that going to a Texas football game, going to see my kids because they live, far away. I mean, I go down to the Betty Ford Center and I participate as an alumni, and I, take groups I tell my story publicly. I do public speaking. I show up at, conventions. I go to the Dentists Association. I mean, I'm trying to talk about recovery to providers, to physicians, to everybody that's willing to listen and learn and understand that anyone that's in the health field has the ability to affect somebody that's struggling with addiction. And I help them understand how to ask those questions. Stop asking them how many drinks they have every week, because you're going to get the standard answer every single time, Yeah. So there's a lot of things that contribute to my recovery today.
So, and you got remarried, right?
I got remarried.
So you're in love now. Did you ever think that you would find that again? I mean, sometimes we were like, okay, well, that's not for me anymore. Yeah. Like a healthy relationship.
No way.
Yeah.
No way did I ever think. And, the fact that he has seen me at my worst and still stood by my side. I mean, we got married once I was in recovery, but he saw me at my worst. And, we went through a hard time. He participated in a family program that really helped him understand the disease and understand that that my love for him, it was always there. It's just, this is where I always say addiction is stronger than love. I loved my girls and love my girls as much as any parent loves their child. People say that we choose alcohol over our kids. And I can understand why people say that. But I also understand that I have a disease that centers in the place that we make our decisions. And I don't think that any of us make that choice willingly. And so my relationship is amazing. I mean, we have an empty nest and we travel and we both work. And I never thought my life could be this good. Honestly, I never thought that I would have someone in my life that loves me, that loves all of me, that loves, when we got married, he said to me, I'll stand in front of you to protect you. I'll stand in back of you in case you fall. And when you're ready, I'll stand next to you and hold your hand and be so proud. And today, I don't need him in front or in back of me, but I get to walk next to him through life because I'm okay, But gosh, I tell my story a lot and I don't usually get emotional, but for some reason today, you've got me like all, stirred up a little bit. But life is beautiful. Life is beautiful. And I'm one of the lucky ones. I really am.
So am I. And I'm very lucky today that you shared this time with me. I cannot thank you enough. I really can't.
Thank you for reaching out. This has been really, sometimes we do the things in the day that we need, and sometimes we hear things that we need to hear in that day. And I needed to hear some of your story. And I guess I needed to tell some of mine today. So thank you for the opportunity to do that.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'll be in touch. This will probably go up like tomorrow or the next day. So I'll make sure I send you a link. But yeah, you're awesome. So I knew who you were. I didn't quite know like you were sober because of like the name change and everything. So my friend, this is a cool story. One of my friends works in Fort Myers. She's a news anchor there. Now, she knew I had this podcast and she knew that I worked in sports. And she sent me, she's like, you got to try to track down Carrie Bates. We just featured her own story.
Yeah,
and I reached out to you and here we are. So it's the best.
Yes. I love it. I love that you did it. And if I can ever be of help to you going forward or anything, please do let me know. Like, I just love meeting all of the people I get to travel this road with every day. And so, there's my cat.
I know. I saw your dog too. It was awesome.
I know. But, I love being able to meet other people in recovery. And I started kind of researching your career and stuff too. And, there's a lot of parallels there. So let's keep in touch for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Carrie. I really appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
We'll see you.
Hook 'em, baby.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to the Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production. Are you a podcaster? Let's talk podcast hosting. Are you tired of your current podcast host? Need real support in a community that gets it? At Rogue Media Network, we offer top-tier podcast hosting services to help you thrive. From hosting and distribution to dedicated support, we've got you covered. Starting as low as $25 a month. Join our community of passionate podcasters today. Contact us at hello@roguemedianetwork.com.